Hi, welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm really happy you're here. And I'm sure you're probably wondering, Matt, whatever happened in that last room that you were in? Are you just going to be in a different room every video this time? And my answer to that is...
Well, we're waiting.
Today, we're going to be looking at the topic of the Golden State Killer, a man of many names who terrorized both men and women throughout the entire state of California. You've probably heard of this story, probably sometime back in 2018, because that was when the story actually ended, okay? But before we get there, we need to go back to the beginning, and I mean the way beginning. We begin our story in West Germany in 1954. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. is the 9-year-old son of Sergeant Joseph DeAngelo Sr., a U.S. airman stationed with his family. He had his mother, a brother, and 2 sisters alongside him during this time of his life. One day, when Joseph was 9, he and his sister Constance were playing in one of the warehouses on base. Eventually, 2 airmen came in and harassed the children. It was then that Joseph DeAngelo watched his 7-year-old sister get raped. This event, reported by Constance's son Jesse decades later, seems to be the major traumatic event in Joseph's life that spiraled his downfall. All that's really known about the next decade of his life is that he was abused by his father, broke into people's homes, and tortured and killed small animals. But after that poor stage of his life, we know that when he was 19 and back in the United States, he enlisted himself in the U.S. Navy, serving almost 2 years aboard the USS Canberra and the USS Piedmont during that time. He then went on to earn his associate's degree at Sierra College and later was accepted into Sacramento University, where he would continue to pursue his education. It was during his college years, specifically in 1970, that DeAngelo became engaged to a nursing student named Bonnie. I don't particularly like using her name because, you know, if I were engaged to a man like what I'm going to describe in just a minute, I wouldn't really want my name to be out there like that, but I digress. According to Bonnie, she broke off the engagement after he attempted to force her to help him cheat on an exam. That was apparently her last straw after a series of violent and dangerous tendencies that DeAngelo displayed to her. 2 weeks after she broke off the engagement, DeAngelo came to her parents' house where she lived with a gun and demanded her to come with him to Reno, where they were supposed to get married. Immediately, she got out of bed and ran to go tell her father. She never really knew what her father did to get DeAngelo to leave her alone, but after that day, she never saw him again. However, in 1973, DeAngelo married Sharon Marie Huddle at Auburn First Congregational Church. Nothing really shows that they lived anything other than a happy life for a majority of their marriage. They bought a house and even had 3 daughters together. However, in 1991, they became legally separated, and it wasn't until 2018 that they got divorced. The reasons for which we will get to. But his marriage wasn't actually the only big thing going on in his life in 1973. See, in May of that same year, after taking a police training course at College of the Sequoias, DeAngelo graduated and became an officer of the law. He served for 6 years between 1973 and 1979 in multiple departments as a burglary unit officer. Ironically enough, it's said that during this time, he was the man responsible for a series of break-ins within Visalia, California. Then known as the Visalia Ransacker, he would meticulously study and watch potential victims before attacking. He would even make hang-up phone calls to see if there was anybody home, and especially to see if that person was a woman. Then he would break into and burglarize people's homes. Usually, he just stole jewelry, money, trophies, stuff like that. That was until one incident in 1975, which found DeAngelo attempting the armed kidnapping of a teenage girl, Elizabeth Snelling. DeAngelo's face was concealed by a ski mask, and he brandished a pistol. As he was pulling the teenage girl out of her home, Elizabeth's father, Charles Snelling, charged at him and was subsequently shot down and killed in his own front yard. Instead of killing her, DeAngelo just kicked Elizabeth in the face and ran off.
A teenage girl was raped today in her home in Contra Costa County, and though officials are not saying it was the work of the East Area rapist, they do say the crime was committed in his style.
Between 1976 and 1979, DeAngelo, then known publicly as the East Area Rapist, committed 40 acts of sexual assault against girls as young as 13 in the East Bay area of Sacramento, as well as multiple break-ins. This put the entire Bay Area in a panic. So many women were experiencing these horrible acts of violence, yet the man just was not being caught, and they had no idea why. But in 1978, the East Area Rapist committed the murders of Brian and Katie Magyar, a newlywed couple who was just walking their dog on the streets of Sacramento, California. Now, DeAngelo was targeting couples. As was the case in many of his break-ins, DeAngelo would force a female victim at gunpoint to tie up her male partner and stack dishes on his back. He warned the man that if he heard the dishes fall, he would murder them both. Then, he would go and assault the female victim. As DeAngelo's crime spree continued, he then moved himself along the coast, now finding himself in Southern California to commit his horrific acts. Weirdly enough, this actually got him the name the Night Stalker, but then was renamed to the original Night Stalker to differentiate him from Richard Ramirez, who was another Southern California serial killer. Since the crime spree now continued in a different place, it didn't yet occur to the investigators that the original Night Stalker and the East Area Rapist were one and the same. It was actually during this time that DeAngelo was fired from the police force for attempting to steal a hammer and a pack of dog repellent. Weird, huh? Alright, real quick. If you think I'm doing alright telling this story, and if you like the video so far, if you really think that I deserve it, it would mean so much to me if I got your support through just liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That's it. It honestly would mean the world, so thank you sincerely. Anyway, back to the video. From 1979 to 1981, a total of 9 people were killed, 8 of whom were in a couple. Dr. Robert Offerman, an orthopedic surgeon, and Dr. Deborah Manning, a psychologist, were both shot to death after being tied up and assaulted on December 30th, 1979. On March 13th, 1980, Lyman and Charlene Smith were both tied up and assaulted in their home, and were bludgeoned to death with a log soon after. The next morning, their 12-year-old son discovered the bodies. On August 19th of the same year, Keith and Patrice Harrington, a newlywed couple, were again bludgeoned inside of their home. Patrice was a pediatric nurse, and Keith was studying to become a doctor. On February 26, 1981, Manuela Witten, a German migrant and loan officer, was assaulted and bludgeoned to death in her Irving, California home. And on July 27, 1981, Gregory Sanchez and Sherry Domingo were both killed in their bed. Gregory was subdued by a gunshot, while Sherry was being tied up and assaulted. Both were savagely beaten to death soon thereafter. Alright, yeah, that was a lot to read. Every single story that I had to read and go through while preparing the script was just so grievous and gross and disgusting and horrible. I can't even imagine what kind of horror these people were experiencing in their final moments. Honestly, and the horror of the family and of the neighbors and of the people of the entire community. I can't even imagine how they had to feel knowing that this guy was still out there, still active and roaming the streets, and that he was probably going to do it again. It has to be so overwhelmingly difficult to comprehend if something like that can even be comprehended, honestly. So for the next 5 years, DeAngelo was actually pretty quiet. The original Night Stalker had no new crimes attributed to him. But that was until the last crime under his belt: the brutal assault and murder of Janelle Cruz. Janelle Cruz was only 18 when she was killed. See, she had just returned home to California from a job corps in Utah, where she was studying to become a legal secretary. On May 4th, 1986, Janelle was home alone when Joseph DeAngelo entered her home through the back sliding door. Though the exact details of how everything unfolded remain unclear, it was obvious that DeAngelo had sexually assaulted, bludgeoned, and murdered her in cold blood. The next afternoon, around 5 p.m., a real estate agent entered the home and found the body. It didn't yet occur to the family that their daughter's slaying was at all related to the earlier murders. In fact, because the last known murder by the original Night Stalker happened 5 years prior, it didn't occur to the police that the same man who murdered Janelle was responsible for 15 years worth of heinous violence. That's because in 2001, investigators with the Contra Costa County Police Department used DNA samples to tie together the murder of Janelle Cruz with the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, and the original Night Stalker, finally bringing them all into one. This brought the total number of murders to 13, as well as dozens of sexual assaults and hundreds of break-ins. After this revelation, DeAngelo started being referred to as EARONS, or East Area Rapist / Original Night Stalker. This name would generally be used to describe the killer until about 2011, when the name Golden State Killer was coined by crime writer Michelle McNamara. Remember her name, because she's going to come up later. Ever since the joining of the East Area Rapist and the Original Night Stalker as one killer, everyone from police to private investigators to federal agencies sought to take down the man responsible. But that's easier said than done, since all they had was unknown DNA to search from. It was actually in 1986 that the first few criminal cases were solved using DNA analyses, so it's really no surprise that DeAngelo stopped what he was doing by then. But the thing is, he already left his DNA all over the place by raping his victims. So the police already had his DNA in rape kits and crime scene analyses. So it was honestly written in the stars that DeAngelo would one day be caught. It was just a matter of when. But whatever took law enforcement officials so long to find the guy? As I said, in 2001, it was only then that they connected the East Area Rapist and the Original Night Stalker together. So for well over a decade, the FBI used their national DNA database to try to find the man responsible. But that didn't really work. All of that continued until Paul Holes, a cold case investigator from Contra Costa County, California, got himself involved. Holes and a team of 5 other investigators started working with Michelle McNamara, who investigated a lot on her own to try to find the man responsible and solve the now cold case. And this all started with how to use the DNA samples properly. But remember, Paul Holes was still with the Contra Costa County Police Department, so he had access to the rape kits, of which he had 3. Since law enforcement officials cannot legally use Ancestry.com or 23andMe to investigate criminal cases, they used a public site called GED Match to try to find some ancestors of the killer, which they did. They ended up finding some second or third cousins, people very, very, very distant from DeAngelo, but who had the same DNA. After identifying those individuals and conducting thorough investigations into their genealogies and their histories, Holes and his team were able to create a sort of family tree. And with that family tree, they were able to find that the Golden State Killer and all these people had one common ancestor, some great-great-grandfather. So really, they were looking at someone from 100+ years ago. Now, imagine for a second what a family tree looks like when it spans that far back. Paul Holes and his team had over 1,000 individuals who could potentially be the murderer. But luckily for them, they knew a ton about this guy. They knew his height. They knew his weight. They knew what he looked like. They had drawings of him. They knew that he was in Northern California, that he found his way down to Southern California for a longer period of time. They knew a ton about this guy based on just the witness accounts of him. So they narrowed down their search to about 10 people, 5 or 10 people. And then it was just investigations from there. And then finally, this happened.
DNA evidence led them to one of the country's most notorious serial killers. Former police officer Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested yesterday, and he is believed to be the so-called Golden State Killer.
That elusive predator is accused of about 50 rapes and 12 murders, crimes that terrorized California in the 1970s and 80s.
They finally caught him. After 40 years, Joseph James DeAngelo was exposed as one of the single most devious, evil, and wretched human beings in all of California's history, maybe that of the entire United States. DeAngelo's court hearing was held between June and August of 2020 at Sacramento State University. Victim impact statements were read by the following. Ken and Karen Smith, the brother and aunt, respectively, of Katie Maggiore. Loretta Maggiore, the mother of Brian Maggiore. Elizabeth Hoop, the daughter of Claude Snelling and a surviving victim of DeAngelo. The brother, sister, mother, and aunt of Janelle Cruz, and many, many more. Family members of DeAngelo, including his nieces and sister, spoke in front of the court, describing his mental and physical pain throughout his entire known life, and expressing their deep, deep sympathy for the victims. And on August 21st, 2021, Joseph James DeAngelo was sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He's now spending the rest of his life in Corcoran State Prison, just 30 miles away from where he began his reign of terror. And there we have it. I don't even know why I'm smiling. That was just such a sad story to read. Writing the script for this was actually kind of difficult. I just kept on getting so sad and just upset when I was reading these stories. I mean, honestly, how could you not be upset by all this? It's so incredibly sad to think that the families of the victims could go so long without having peace of mind about who killed their family member. Is just terrifying to me. And even more terrifying to me is the fact that a man can commit so many crimes without going identified, caught, whatever. He just roamed around free for 40 years. It's sick stuff. It's sick, saddening stuff. Honestly, if you're at all interested in this subject, I highly recommend that you go and read the victim impact statements and look into this subject a little bit more. It is heavy stuff. So yeah, viewer discretion, I guess. I don't quite know how anyone's gonna get through this video, but if you did, and if you're still here, thank you so very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Again, if you think I deserve it, I really would appreciate your support just through liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really does mean a lot, so thank you if that's what you choose to do. And hey, if you've already done those things, then cool, thank you. And if you have any ideas for future videos, please share them down below. And hey, if I use yours, then I don't know, I'll owe you a high five or something. Speaking of that, the mental health iceberg video just hit 6,000 views, and I don't really know what to do about that. I never really thought that any of my videos would make more than 10 views, so I'm just so incredibly thankful for that. Also in the news, I'm over 100 subscribers now, which I didn't think was going to happen for a while. In fact, 100 subscribers was my goal for the end of the year. Okay, it's June now. I'm just blown away by that. I really did not expect that I would be even past like 20 subscribers with the way that I upload. So again, thank you all so much for your support. It means so much. It's the reason I'm doing this. So yeah, thank you again. Really, I appreciate it. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video and maybe learned something new. Bye.